This video is brought to you by my wonderful Patreon team. If you want to join the Patreon team, please click the link down below, and if you don't, that's totally fine. I hope you enjoy the video. 9/11 changed everything. Not just politically, I'm talking about the way that media has changed and even depicted 9/11 in movies around the early 2000s. There are many scenes, moments in movies that had to be changed or even edited out with visual effects due to the events of 9/11, and many will possibly remember the most famous example of this being Sam Raimi's Spider-Man's Twin Tower trailer sequence, which seemed to be completely edited out of the movie, of course out of respect of the events of 9/11. Many studios, directors and films went out of their way to make sure they did respect exactly what happened to people and of course that tragic day. Of course, respecting and feeling the room plays an important part of what people expect to see in a movie. Many people want to be able to escape from the stresses of the real world and forget everything that's going on outside of the room. And unfortunately, sometimes movies and games can hit a little bit too close to home. It's been a very long time, of course, since 9/11, but of course it still haunts and stays with people, and it will forever. Over time, we've been able to tell stories about the events, and even some films and directors have been able to replicate that feeling of dread and destruction, of course through fictional means. We have seen so many tragic and terrifying events throughout history, but only a few stand out that really shape the generation that is affected by them and how that generation moves forward from those events. And in 2020, I think we can all agree that COVID-19 will possibly never be forgotten. It has changed a lot, not just in society, but once again in the way that media was produced around it. Many films were held back, of course, due to lack of sales, and there will be no cinemas open to be able to show said movie unless they were willing to go straight to a streaming device, and even reruns for our old TV shows were played constantly, and even sometimes TV shows adopted the new circumstances and tried to tell a story which was way more relatable with people in lockdown. Many of us were stuck indoors alone, or at least with only a few people that will be accompanying us for the next few months or possibly even years. In the UK it was tough. Shop shelves were empty, people were panicking, and all I remember early on is that I may have possibly had it because I remember I had a hard time breathing and I had a fever that wouldn't let me sleep properly for about 4 days. So it was safe to say me myself was worried, stressed, afraid, and I just needed a distraction. And of course, during the early months of lockdown, we was given the perfect form of meditation by the names of Doom Eternal, Animal Crossing New Horizons, and of course Resident Evil 3. If there were 3 games that embodied the feeling of emotions that people had, it would be this holy trilogy of games. Resident Evil allowed us to take aim and take out the virus that had infested its way into our own lives. When all felt lost, our fan favourite Jill Valentine came back kicking ass and giving us a finger or even a loaded gun to point at for those who were responsible for this lockdown and this virus. And during this moment, being told we wasn't able to leave our homes and the whole world seemed like it was just falling apart around us, and with every COVID update and every injustice that seemed to hit Earth, we were pissed off, and no matter how loud we could scream, there wasn't anything we could do. Enter Doom Eternal, ripping and tearing your way through demons with one of the most hardcore and rage-endorsing soundtracks in the industry. Doom Eternal was the perfect stress ball that we needed to let out that isolated rage that built up inside of us. The soundtrack, the blood, the gore, the speed, it was exactly what we needed exactly at that right time. But surprisingly, on the same day as Doom, there seems to be something completely opposite to go with it as a companion piece, and that is of course Animal Crossing New Horizons. Being able to connect with friends in Animal Crossing is something that a lot of people really needed at that right time. As much as it's nice to have a stress ball and a reliever and rip your way through demons, it's also nice to remember that your friends are there for you and you're also there for your friends. Being able to meet up in a virtual world and stay connected despite the world telling you not to do so It's what people needed, and despite being stuck in lockdown and the world seeming like it was only burning around you, it seemed like maybe one day everything will be fine and we're all going to be okay. The gaming industry proved that it was able to help us through this tough time. I never really believed that there could ever be such a possibility of something being so perfectly timed as these free video games, but somehow all these games had themes and even dedicated emotions created by lockdown, which was only accompanied with the feeling of the control in your hand. But then something happened that made me realise that there is a possibility that as much as there's a game that could be released at the right time, what if there was a game that was released during the wrong time and in the wrong place? No matter what your feelings are towards The Last of Us Part 2 story, this video isn't about that. I don't care if you think that it was crap, that's entirely up to you and I totally respect your opinion, and I don't really care if you think it was incredible. And that's great because, you know, all games have their own merits and you deserve to enjoy what you enjoy. But everywhere I looked, no matter if people liked it or hated it, there was something that came together with a common theme. There was a heavy, tiring and downright depressing nature to this game's world and themes. But before we get onto that, we need to talk about something that's important, and that's the marketing of The Last of Us Part 2. Marketing, whether you like it or not, is an art form, and it's an art form that we as a species of modern consumption have mastered, and even in some cases of the consumer, have become blind to the marketing elements at play during our everyday today. Any form of marketing is aimed to sell a product within the world's current circumstances. The most basic form of this would be the summer blockbuster, for example, releasing a big action-packed movie during the summer holidays when people are away from work and kids are away from schools, creating a buzz to fill a workless space with much needed movie entertainment. And this the same thing goes for the gaming industry, and there's a reason why consoles and games are always released around the months of November or even October, to create a buzz just before Christmas to get the most sales out of these circumstances. And this is just the most basic form of ways that marketing works within circumstances and even upcoming holidays within the world. And Sony and Naughty Dog had a big task on their hands. There were many errors and even lessons learned by the impact of The Last of Us Part 2 and what it had to endure during its release. How do you make a follow-up to what could be one of the most loved stories in gaming and definitely a generation-defining video game that was The Last of Us Part 1? For me, the first game meant so much. It was a moment in life where I found my friends and people who I still care about to this day. It was a point in my life where I felt like everything was changing. I was maturing through college, and it was a story that reminded me that there is a light at the end of a lonely tunnel. I will always look back in college and think about me and my best friend sitting around a computer screen in one of the classrooms, watching a Let's Play of The Last of Us Part 1 and enjoying and bonding over this game. For me, it's a time capsule which was crunched into a disc, and every time I load that game up or even think of it, I'm always going to remember it quite fondly. But The Last of Us Part 2 was a point in the gaming industry which was a completely fresh and new challenge. How do you market a game filled with so much hate and tiring emotional situations to a world that is literally falling apart? Back in 2013 with the first game, we didn't have to think about a pandemic or even the fear of running out of food. But then there's this horrible reminder as you walk through abandoned stores and shops and see those empty shelves, and you think to yourself that all this was happening to you right outside your own homes. And at the time it was something we was living through. I remember walking through Tesco and seeing all the shelves be completely empty and just deciding to go off canned food, and well, the little canned food that there was. Seeing banners and rules hung up in Last of Us 2 telling you to stay inside and make sure you get tested, and being forced to wear a mask for your own safety to stop breathing in the spores and spreading this infection further. All of it seemed too real and it seemed too relevant at the time, and that seemed like there was a lot of stress under exactly the elements and themes of The Last of Us Part 2, because at the time we was living through the hell that Ellie was enduring herself. The gaming industry in its lifetime has never had to truly account for real world events. There have of course been situations where games get delayed for shootings or even extremist attacks out of respect for the victims, but to have a global situation go down in history that will be so closely linked to a plot of a game is something entirely fresh for the industry, which has been growing over the last 3 decades. The sole purpose of The Last of Us Part 2 was to make you feel bad, depressed, sad, and made you think about your actions, to make you look at your hands and truly realise you have blood on them from everyone you killed, to make you overcome and feel every bullet that you pass through a human's body. Every time you looked on social media, every time you looked at a newspaper, every time you turned on the TV, all we saw was death and people being horrible to people. And do you know what people didn't need anymore? Death. We went through enough of that, so there was a lot of expectations going into this game because of an early story leak which was all central around death and losing a loved one and losing people close to you or losing a character who many people bonded with. There was a lot of tension and weight on people's shoulders built up from the pandemic. Mentally, it's not what people needed. It wasn't the blockbuster game that people should have gotten at that point. For many, I know that they're going to look at The Last of Us Part 2 and possibly feel sadness, regret, not the happiness or relief that Naughty Dog was possibly hoping to get, but instead a stained reminder of what we had to endure through 2020, through COVID, through the injustice of the world, horrible politicians. It wasn't what people needed. If there was a wrong time and a wrong place for a game to be released, such as The Last of Us Part 2, it was definitely during the early months of lockdown. And I don't think it's a bad game at all. I think it personally holds a very important message and even lesson to be learned for the gaming industry. Learning about filling the room and learning about your current circumstances and when to release a game and how it could affect the reception of the game overall. We're in a place of isolation, stress and anxiety that we're all going through together, and it acts as a time capsule and a strong reminder of that experience that we never want to experience again. And for many people, I can imagine it's a time capsule that they're truly never going to forget. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I felt like this was something that needed to be spoke about because not many people touched on it. The Last of Us Part 2 had many problems and many people didn't enjoy it for certain reasons, which I understand, but overall I feel like it was affected by the circumstances of the world with COVID. Of course, if you don't agree, I would love to hear why you don't agree and why you think this is a load of poopy that I'm talking about out of my mouth. But if you did enjoy this video, please feel free to leave a like, leave a comment down below, tell me what you thought, and of course subscribe for more videos like this every single week. And of course I will see you at the next checkpoints. Goodbye.